Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a journey, a really deep one, back into the Bronze Age. We're going to explore a culture whose impact, well, it fundamentally shaped the linguistic and genetic map for like half the globe. We are talking about the Yamnaya culture.
That's right. Sometimes called the pit grave culture or the ochre grave culture.
What?
Very descriptive names.
Exactly. These were the people dominating that huge Pontic-Caspian steppe, roughly between, 3,300 and 2,600 BC?
Around then, yes. It's a big time frame, but that's the core period.
And our mission today really is to give you a shortcut, a way into understanding the whole Proto-Indo-European problem, that massive puzzle in human prehistory.
It's one of the big ones.
Why focus on the Yamnaya for this? Well, they're basically considered the prime candidates, the main speakers of late Proto-Indo-European, or PIE.
Which makes them, potentially, the genetic and linguistic ancestors for a vast swath of people today. Think Ireland to India, it's huge.
Geographically, just to set the scene, we're talking that immense grassy plain, the Pontic-Caspian steppe, between the Southern Bug and Dniester rivers over in the west, all the way across to the Ural River in the east.
A vast area. And the origin point seems to be near Mykolaiv in Ukraine. Around 3,600 to 3,400 BC is when things really start cooking there.
So it starts relatively small and then just explodes outwards.
What's fascinating here is the Yamnaya culture, it's more than just cots and bones. It's what archaeologists call the material expression. Basically, the physical stuff left behind by the biggest prehistoric nomadic expansion Europe had ever witnessed.
A huge shift then, culturally and genetically.
Monumental, rapid, widespread.
Yeah.
And their discovery story is tied right into their graves. Vasily Grotov, back near the Donets River, 1901 to 1903, he defined the culture.
And the name Yamnaya.
It's pretty straightforward, actually. It comes from the Russian word yama, means pit.
For the pit graves.
Exactly. Those simple pit chambers under those massive burial mounds, the Kurgans. That combination mobility, monumentality, expansion, that's the Yamnaya signature.
Okay, let's dig into that lifestyle. To understand their impact, we need to get a handle on how they actually lived on this huge open steppe.
Right, it was all about adaptation. Their economy was fundamentally based on animal husbandry.
So herding.
Primarily herding. Big mobile herds, sheep, cattle, goats. They weren't tied down to fields in the same way agriculturalists were. They did some fishing, some foraging, especially along rivers. Maybe a little bit of farming near those rivers too.
But the core is pastoralism, meat and milk on the move.
Exactly. A mobile society needs a mobile food source.
And that implies a certain kind of social structure to manage all that movement, right? You can't just wander randomly with huge herds.
No, you need coordination. They were mostly nomadic or semi-nomadic, and it seems they were organized under a chiefdom system.
Chiefdoms. So some level of hierarchy, political control.
Precisely. That political structure was key. It let them manage large numbers of animals, people, across vast distances, negotiate access to grazing, water, maybe deal with other groups.
Okay, and this is where we get to the tech that made it all possible. The real aha moment. It seems simple, but...
Oh, it's absolutely revolutionary.
Yeah.
We're talking wheeled carts and four-wheeled wagons.
The wagon. Seems basic now, but back then.
Game-changing. Think of them as mobile infrastructure. Probably pulled by oxen initially. These wagons let them pack up everything, homes, supplies, the whole society, and move efficiently. They essentially detached themselves from fixed locations. First, highly mobile, large-scale steppe chiefdoms.
And the horse. That's always linked with steppe nomads. What's the story with the Yamnaya and horses? Were they riding them across the plains?
The horse question. It's a classic debate. We do have some skeletal evidence.
Wear patterns on bones.
Exactly. Changes in the pelvis, the femurs, and some Yamnaya skeletons that suggest long-term horse riding. But, and it's a big but, archaeozoologists like William Taylor are skeptical about widespread riding during the core Yamnaya period. Taylor argues the specific genetic changes for horse domestication, for riding specifically, actually happened much later, long after the main Yamnaya phase.
And genetics supports that later date.
It does seem to. Recent genetic work suggests the key domestication event for the modern riding horse probably happened after about 2700 BC.
So right at the end of the Yamnaya period or even into the successor cultures.
Right. More likely linked to groups like the Sintashta culture, not the initial Yamnaya wave. So yes, they had horses probably for meat, maybe some transport, pulling things, but the image of Yamnaya cavalry sweeping across the steppe, probably not accurate for the early phase.
Okay, so wagons, yes. Mass riding, maybe not yet. But still, a mobile society focused on resources. What about inside that society? Any signs of hierarchy, different jobs?
Definitely signs of early social stratification. Certain people, like metallurgists, craftsmen, seem to have had special status. We see new metalworking tech appearing specific axe types, daggers.
Like status symbols.
Could be. Mallory and Adams even suggest maybe a move towards a tripartite social structure. The classic Indo-European idea of priests, warriors, and commoner sherders.
But is the evidence solid for that three-way split?
Well, the sources caution us there. It's an appealing model, fits linguistic theories, but concrete archaeological proof for that specific rigid structure within Yamnaya society. It's still a bit thin on the ground. Chiefdoms imply hierarchy, yes, but maybe not that exact formalized structure yet.
Makes sense. And what were they eating to fuel all this movement?
David Anthony looked into this using isotopes from bones. High protein, lots of dairy, meat, definitely. Milk, yogurt, cheese, the full pastoral package. Also soups from seeds, wild plants, and maybe even mead.
Mead, honey wine.
Possibly, it fits the picture. A high-energy diet for a physically demanding mobile life.
Right, and the most visible thing they left behind are those burial mounds, the Kurgans. They dominate the landscape.
They are the signature feature, absolutely. These huge earthen mounds built over simple pit graves, often placed on ridges visible for miles.
That takes serious effort. Communal labor.
Immense effort. It suggests a real focus on ancestor veneration, marking territory, maybe displaying the power of the lineage or chiefdom.
What about the burial itself? Inside the pit?
Highly standardized ritual. The body is usually supine, face up with knees bent. Relaxed posture almost.
And the ochre. That's where the ochre grave name comes from.
Yes, they were often covered extensively in red ochre, that deep red pigment. It probably had strong symbolic meaning: blood, life, earth, maybe preservation. And sometimes near the Kurgans you find these large carved stones, anthropomorphic stelae.
Like standing stones with human features?
Sort of. Rudimentary heads, arms, belts, sometimes weapons carved on them. Guardians, ancestor figures, we don't know for sure.
Were these Kurgans for everyone, or just special people?
The evidence points to special individuals, certain adults, and the analysis suggests predominantly males, though not exclusively.
And the grave goods tell a story.
Oh yes, status, gender. Some elite burials have complete wooden wagons included.
Wow, bearing a whole wagon.
Incredible, isn't it? It shows just how central that technology was to their identity and status in life and death. We also see regional differences. Eastern Yamnaya burials near the Volga tend to have more grave goods.
More wealth in the East?
Possibly. Or maybe just different burial customs. The rituals there seem a bit more male-centered, more focused on dominance, perhaps, compared to the Western Yamnaya groups. Might suggest the East was the original heartland, or maybe more militarily focused.
Okay, so this powerful, mobile culture spreads incredibly fast. Where did it actually come from? Who are their immediate parents, culturally speaking?
The origin puzzle. This is where archaeology gets really interesting and debated. Did Yamnaya just sort of bubble up locally as a Bronze Age development? Or can we trace it back to specific preceding cultures?
Let's list the main contenders the sources mentioned.
Okay, the big three usually cited are, first, the Kvansk culture, Middle Volga region earlier, like 4700, 3800 BC.
Okay.
Second, the Sredny Stog culture, more western steppe around the Dnieper, 4500, 3500 BC. And third, the Repin culture, based around the Don River. A bit later, maybe 3950, 3300 BC, leading right up to Yamnaya.
David Anthony makes a strong case for the Don Volga area, focusing on Khmelnytsk and Repin, doesn't he? What's his argument based on?
Mostly pottery, actually. Detailed ceramic analysis. Anthony argues the Yamnaya homeland is really that Don Volga zone, starting around 3400 BC. And his key point is that the late pottery from Khmelnytsk and Repin looks almost identical to the earliest Yamnaya pottery found right there.
So a smooth transition in the material culture.
Pretty much. It suggests an evolution in place, not necessarily a big invasion creating Yamnaya. For Anthony, the rapid spread of Yamnaya across the steppes from 3400 to 3200 BC wasn't just people moving, it was a new political and economic system, that mobile chiefdom package taking over. And that system became the physical manifestation, the material expression of late Proto-Indo-European spreading.
But the western steppe, the Sredny Stog area, was clearly important too.
Absolutely critical. The Ukrainian archaeologist Dmytro Telegin, way back, argued that Sredny Stog and Yamnaya were basically one continuous cultural development. Sredni Stog laid the foundation. Yamnaya was the next phase.
And genetics seems to back telogen up now.
It really does. Recent genetic work, especially looking at the admixture patterns, shows strong genetic continuity between the Sredni Stog people and the later Yamnaya people in that western region.
So maybe the idea, the Yamnaya package, came from the east, but the people in the west were largely descended from Sredni Stog.
That's a plausible synthesis. The technology and political structure might have crystallized in the east, but the Sredni Stog population provided the genetic base for the western Yamnaya expansion.
And then there's a third idea, bringing in the farmers from the west.
Right, Parpala's hypothesis from 2015. He looked at the Tripilia culture, those big agricultural settlements, proto-cities almost, just west of the steppe.
The Cutuni-Tripilia complex.
That's the one. Parpala suggested that as the late Tripilia farmers expanded eastwards into the steppe, they encountered and mixed with the local Sredni Stog pastoralists, and that fusion farming knowledge, herding practices, maybe new social ideas that created the Yamnaya culture, a true hybrid.
Wow, so many potential ingredients, a real melting pot on the steppe edge. And from this Yamnaya horizon, new cultures emerged, carrying the torch further.
We see that clearly. Yamnaya transforms into, or gives rise to, the corded Ware culture, which explodes north and west into Europe.
Right.
Then there's the catacomb culture, mostly replacing Yamnaya in the west and south on the steppe itself, and the Poltavka culture pushing east towards the Urals. They all inherit parts of the Yamnaya legacy, the mobility, the genetics, likely the language base.
Okay, let's pivot to the genetics directly. This is where things get really defined. Moving past Potts and Graves, who were the Yamnaya, biologically speaking.
This is where the picture becomes incredibly sharp. The headline finding. The Yamnaya weren't some ancient, pure lineage. They were profoundly admixed. They're the result of a huge mixing event. That's why geneticists often just call them Western steppe herders, or WSH. It signifies this mixed ancestry.
So what went into the mix? What are the ingredients for WSH ancestry?
It boils down to two main, very distinct ancient populations mixing together. And this mixing started way back, around 5000 BC, mostly on the eastern side of the Pontic-Caspian steppe. They mixed in roughly equal parts, 50-50.
Okay, population number one.
Eastern European hunter-gatherers, or EHG. These folks were related to ancient populations further east, like the Malto-Burese culture in Siberia. Think of them as the indigenous hunter-gatherers of the Eurasian forest steppe zone.
And number two, the southern component.
That's the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, or CHG. People whose ancestry traces back to the Caucasus Mountains, maybe even further south towards Iran. They moved north onto the steppe and mixed with the local EHGs. That EHG-CHG blend is the absolute foundation of the Western steppe herder profile.
EHG from the northeast, CHG from the south. Got it. But you mentioned other inputs later. What about those Neolithic farmers nearby?
Right, there's a bit more complexity. Yamnaya individuals do show some later admixture that looks like it came from Anatolian or Levantine farmers. But, and this is really important, it seems to have come via the Caucasus, through populations often labeled Caucasus Neolithic.
So not directly from the farmers spreading across Western Europe.
Exactly. It didn't come from the main wave of early European farmers, EEF, who brought agriculture to places like Germany or France. The key difference is that Yamnaya lack a significant Western hunter-gatherer, WHG DNA, which was very common in those EEF groups.
Why does that matter?
It tells us the Yamnaya gene pool formed primarily on the steppe and in interaction with the Caucasus to the south, largely separate from the main farmer-hunter-gatherer dynamics happening further west in Europe. They're genetically distinct.
Okay, that clarifies things. Let's talk specific markers. The Y DNA, the male line, often reveals expansion patterns.
And it certainly does for Yamnaya. Paternally, they were overwhelmingly dominated by haplogroup R1b, specifically a subclade called Z2103, which is downstream from R1bl23.
R1b, that sounds familiar. Isn't that common in Western Europe today, like Ireland, Britain, Spain?
Yes and no. It is R1b, but the specific Yamnaya branch, Z2103, is actually pretty rare in Western Europe now. It's more common in southeastern Europe, the Balkans, Anatolia, the Caucasus today. The R1b dominant in Western Europe, like P312 or U106S21, is a related but different branch that split off earlier. It's a paradox we'll come back to.
Interesting. So mostly the specific R1BZ2103, any other male line?
Minor components, yes. Some J2, some I2 show up, but R1BZ2103 is really the signature.
What about the maternal side, the mtDNA?
Much more diverse, as you often see. A mix of standard West Eurasian haplogroups, U, TH, and others, suggests women were perhaps incorporated from a wider range of local groups during the expansion.
Anything unusual there?
One really fascinating finding. In some Yamnaya samples from northern Ukraine, they found East Asian mtDNA, specifically haplogroup C4.
Wow, East Asian ancestry way out on the Pontic steppe back then.
A small amount, but yes. It's a reminder that the steppe wasn't isolated. It was a highway, connecting populations across huge distances, even in the Bronze Age. Europe to Siberia wasn't a closed border.
Incredible. Okay, physically, can we tell what they look like?
Genetic predictions suggest mostly brown eyes, light to intermediate skin tone, not super pale, but lighter than earlier hunter-gatherers, and brown hair.
No blue eyes or blonde hair. That feels counter to some popular images.
Well, a big study in 2022 by Lazaridis and team specifically highlighted that none of the Yamnaya samples were predicted to have blue eyes or blonde hair. Those traits seem to have become much more common later, perhaps in the corded Ware populations or other descendants in Northern Europe. But the core Yamnaya group, probably darker featured.
But they were tall.
Oh yes, very tall for the time. One study found they had the highest genetic selection pressure for height of any ancient population ever tested. They were physically imposing. That might have played a role in their interactions with shorter farming groups.
And maybe their biggest genetic gift to later Europeans, the ability to digest milk as adults.
Lactase persistence, absolutely crucial. The allele, the gene variant, that allows adults to digest lactose. It's strongly hypothesized that the Yamnaya, or related steppe groups, were the main vector that carried this trait into Europe in large numbers.
Which makes sense if your whole economy is based on milk.
Exactly. It's a massive advantage if you rely on dairy. It fundamentally changed nutrition, resource use, probably even population growth across Europe. A truly transformative genetic trait spread by the steppe migrations.
Okay, so summing up the genetics. Dominant male lineage, R1BZ2103, admixed EH-GCHG ancestry, tall, lactose tolerant, probably brown hair and eyes. David Reich uses this data to paint a picture of their society, right?
He does. Reich argues the genetic coherence across such a vast area points to a single coordinated group, and that extreme dominance of just one or two Y-DNA lines. He suggests it strongly points towards an oligarchy, or a highly patriarchal chiefdom structure, meaning a small number of elite males, perhaps clan leaders or chiefs, had disproportionate reproductive success during the expansion. They passed on their genes far more widely than others. It suggests a society built around powerful, mobile male lineages.
Okay, genetics and society linked. Now let's connect it to language. If they spread their genes, did they spread Proto-Indo-European?
That's the core of the Kurgan hypothesis, isn't it?
Yeah.
Originally championed by Marija Kambutas, she was the first to really strongly link the Yamnaya culture specifically with the speakers of late Proto-Indo-European.
And that idea holds up today?
Largely, yes. The integration of genetics, archaeology, and linguistics makes the Pontic-Caspian steppe the leading candidate for the PIE homeland, the Urheimat. David Anthony is a major proponent of this synthesis.
Though maybe not for the very earliest stage of PIE, like the Anatolian languages Hittite.
Good point. The Anatolian branch seems to have split off before the main Yamnaya period. So PIE might have already started diversifying by 3300 BC. Yamnaya likely represents the speakers of the core PIE that gave rise to most other branches.
We should briefly mention the alternative, the Anatolian hypothesis.
Right. Colin Renfrew's idea. That PIE spread much earlier, out of Anatolia with the first farmers, around 8,000 years ago.
But the genetic wave from the steppe in the Bronze Age kind of challenges that.
It does pose a significant challenge. The massive population turnover from the steppe into Europe fits the timing and geography of the Kurgan model much better for most branches of Indo-European.
And even within the steppe model, the precise origin point is debated. Maybe further south and east.
Exactly. More recent studies looking at the fine details of the genetics often point towards the Caucasus Lower Volga, CLV region, as the ultimate crucible. Which makes sense, as that's where the foundational EHG-CHG mixing happened. Genetics and language origins potentially in the same place.
And Anthony's idea about how the language itself formed mirrors that genetic mix.
Yeah, it's elegant. He suggests PIE wasn't just an EHG language or a CHG language, but a fusion. Maybe a dominant EHD language that absorbed significant features, sounds, grammar, words from the CHD language spoken by the newcomers from the Caucasus, language reflecting the genetic blend.
And linguists like Kurgan have looked at the vocabulary itself, suggesting different stages.
Right, based on what words existed when. They talk about a basal Indo-European stage, something that's called Indo-Anatolian, maybe linked to the earlier Sredni Stog culture. Crucially, this early stage seems to lack a lot of farming words. Fits with herders, not full-blown agriculturalists.
Okay, so basal PIE equals herders.
Then comes the Yamnaya expansion, the wagons, interaction with farmers. This leads to core Indo-European. This later stage, developing probably in the western Yamnaya area, shows a big increase in words related to agriculture, wheeled vehicles, maybe more complex social structures. The language evolved as the society did.
So the Yamnaya spread this core PIE, and their successors carried it further.
They were the main engine. The corded Ware people moving into northern Europe likely spread the ancestors of Balto-Slavic, Germanic, Italo-Celtic, maybe Indo-Iranian initially too. The catacomb culture moving east might have links to Tocharian, which ended up way out in the Tarim Basin. It all radiates out from that Yamnaya core.
So what does this mean for the map today? Let's trace these migrations. The impact on Europe must have been immense.
Revolutionary is not too strong a word. Genetically, the link between Yamnaya and the corded Ware culture is incredibly tight. Corded Ware individuals across Central and Eastern Europe show up to 75% Yamnaya-like ancestry.
75%. That's not just mixing, that's close to population replacement.
It's a massive demographic shift in a relatively short time. It suggests either huge migrations or a scenario where Yamnaya-descended males had dramatically higher reproductive success, or likely a combination of both.
And that legacy is still strong in modern Europeans.
Very strong, especially in the north and center. Modern Central and Northern Europeans typically carry between about 39% and 50% Yamnaya-related ancestry. It's a huge chunk of their genome.
And the highest is where?
Surprisingly, Finland, around 50.4%.
Finland, way up north. How does that work if the migration came from the south, from the steppes? Shouldn't it be closer to the source?
That's a really sharp question, and it touches on complexities we'll get to later critiques raised by archaeologists like Leo Klein. But one possible explanation involves later movements. The initial Yamnaya corded Ware wave laid the foundation, but subsequent migrations, maybe involving early Germanic or Balto-Slavic speakers, might have further concentrated that steppe ancestry in the north and east, while mixing it more with older Neolithic layers in the south. It's not just one wave.
Okay, so highest in the north center, lower in southern Europe.
Generally, yes. Southern Europeans show lower levels, maybe 18.5% to 32.6%. And it's lowest in populations with long histories of relative isolation, like Sardinians, who have only about 2% to 7%.
The Yamnaya also delivered another key genetic piece into Europe, didn't they? From Siberia.
Right, the ancient North Eurasian, or AEE component. This deep ancestry related to the Malta-Bure people from Siberia was present in the EHGs, who mixed to form the Yamnaya. So the Yamnaya expansion was the main way this ancient Siberian-linked ancestry got spread widely into Europe.
And the Baltic region is a good case study of their impact.
A perfect one. In the Baltics, the shift to farming, the Neolithic transition, didn't happen like in Western Europe with Anatolian farmers slowly moving in. Instead, it happened at the same time as the arrival, en masse, of people with Yamnaya-like ancestry.
So they brought farming with them, or at least catalyzed the shift.
It seems so. Their arrival seems to be the trigger for the adoption of farming and herding there, showing just how disruptive and transformative their expansion was.
We focus a lot on Europe, but this story stretches way east into Asia.
Absolutely. Significant Yamnaya-related ancestry is found across Central and South Asia, especially high-end groups historically identified as Indo-Aryan speakers. The percentage varies a lot, maybe 6.5%, up to over 50% in some groups.
But it's not the original Yamnaya guys who walked all the way to India, right? There's a nuance there.
A critical nuance.
Yeah.
This is the secondary expansion model, worked out by researchers like Narasimhan. The steppe ancestry in South Asia didn't come directly from the 3300 BC Yamnaya wave. It came later.
Okay, walk us through it. If Yamnaya are the grandparents, who are the parents that reached South Asia?
The key group is the Central Steppe Middle-Late Bronze Age MLBA cluster. These folks were themselves descended from Yamnaya successors, particularly corded Ware and the related Sintashta culture further east.
Okay, so step one. Corded Ware Sintashta types move east across the steppe. They already have lots of WSH ancestry.
Right, maybe around 67% WSH.
Yeah.
Step two. As they moved east, somewhere in Central Asia, they mixed with local groups, picking up ancestry from West Siberian hunter-gatherers, WSHG, about 9% WSHG admixed.
Okay, so corded Ware Sintashta plus West Siberian hunter-gatherer equals Central Steppe MLBA.
Exactly. That specific blend is the Central Steppe MLBA profile. Step 3. That group then moved south into Central Asia and ultimately South Asia, contributing up to maybe 30% of the ancestry in some modern South Asian populations.
So it's crucial. South Asian steppe ancestry comes from descendants of Yamnaya who mixed further east, not the original Yamnaya themselves.
Precisely. It clarifies the timing and the pathway.
And fast forwarding to the Iron Age, groups like the Scythians, are they related?
They continue the story. Scythians were also steppe nomads, and genetically they look like a mix. They have Yamnaya-related ancestry as a base, but also a significant chunk of East Asian-related ancestry, maybe from groups like the modern Nganasan people in Siberia.
More mixing on the steppe.
Constant mixing. And the East Asian component was often higher in Eastern Scythian groups compared to Western ones. The steppe was always a zone of interaction. But that Yamnaya WSH component provides the underlying thread connecting many of these groups across millennia.
Okay, we've built a strong case for the Yamnaya's massive influence. But science isn't about simple stories. We need to look at the challenges, the wrinkles in the narrative.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key. We need to acknowledge where the data gets complicated or contradicts the simplest model.
And one of the biggest complications involves that dominant male line, the R1BZ2103.
This is the paternal line discontinuity issue. Remember, Yamnaya elite males were overwhelmingly R1BZ2103. But when you look at their direct cultural successors in Europe, the corded Ware people,
their Y DNA is different.
Strikingly different. Corded Ware males are overwhelmingly R1A, a different branch of R, not the R1BZ2103 that dominated Yamnaya.
Wait, so they share 75% of their overall DNA, but the main father line changes completely.
That's what the findings, like those highlighted by Hyde and others in 2023, suggest.
Yeah.
It's a major puzzle. The corded Ware population is clearly derived genetically from Yamnaya-related groups, but the specific elite male lineage seems to disappear or become marginalized very quickly in that transition.
How could that happen? If the Yamnaya were these dominant R1b oligarchs, why didn't their Y chromosome surname carry forward into the next big culture?
Great question. It forces us to rethink the social dynamics. Did the original Yamnaya R1b elite move on or collapse? Did they integrate into corded Ware society but lose elite status? Or perhaps the corded Ware phenomenon represents the adoption of Yamnaya culture and language by related R1A carrying groups, maybe from the forest steppe zone who then became dominant. Archaeologists like Leo Klein have pointed to this, and the general lack of direct male line continuity as a major challenge to the simplest Yamnaya conquest models. It suggests the spread of culture and genes might have been more complex than just one group's patrilineage expanding everywhere.
Language and autosomal DNA spread, but the founding father's specific line didn't always dominate.
Something like that. It reminds us that cultural and genetic transmission can be decoupled in complex ways.
Klein also had issues with the distribution of the autosomal DNA, the overall WSH ancestry, right?
Yes, another sharp critique. He pointed out that if Yamnaya migrated west from the steppe, you'd intuitively expect the highest percentage of their WSH ancestry to be near their western limits, like the Danube.
But it's not.
It's often lowest there and highest, as we said, far away in northern Europe, like Finland. Klein argued this pattern is the opposite of what a simple, single-wave migration should produce.
So how do people explain that pattern now?
It reinforces the idea of multiple waves and complex local histories. The WSH ancestry in modern northern Europe likely didn't arrive only from the initial Yamnaya corded Ware push. It was probably reinforced and concentrated by later movements, maybe early Germanic speakers, Balto-Slavic speakers, who themselves carried high levels of this ancestry and expanded into regions that had perhaps been less densely populated by earlier farmers. It's a story layered over millennia, not just one event.
Okay, so the picture is nuanced, still debated, but the overall impact seems undeniable. We've covered a huge amount of ground, from those burial pits on the steppe all the way to the genetic makeup of people living today in Europe and Asia. It seems clear the Yamnaya were this incredibly dynamic, mobile society. Their innovations, chiefdoms, wagons, the PIE language base really did reshape two continents.
They absolutely did. They represent this pivotal moment, this fusion of ancient hunter-gatherer groups, EHG from the north and east, CHG from the south, creating a new genetic and cultural force that became foundational for so much of Eurasian prehistory and history, a true watershed culture. So we've seen how the Yamnaya likely spread key traits like lactose tolerance, the linguistic foundations for languages spoken by billions, and how their society might have been structured around these mobile elite male lineages, even if that specific Y-DNA didn't ultimately dominate everywhere. Considering this enormous impact, this rapid transformation they triggered across such vast areas, it leaves us with a fascinating question to ponder. To what extent did the specific social and political setup of these Bronze Age nomads, that system built on mobility, hierarchy, and maybe elite competition, actually set a kind of template for later historical expansions and societal structures? And how might that ancient blueprint, that system of rapid elite-driven change, still subtly echo in the genetic patterns and even cultural tendencies we see across Eurasia today?